My own father looked me dead in the eye and told me my promotion ceremony was a pathetic waste of his time, then shrugged and reached the TV remote like he'd just commented on the weather. 3 days later, I stood inside a packed room at Fort Meade in my full U.S. Army dress blues, staring at two empty, cold chairs in the middle row, while every single soldier around me hugged their proud families. Drop a comment right now showing where you are watching this from, because what my family did next to save their favorite golden boy will show you exactly how far toxic people go when they realize you finally have power. The ceremony room always buzzed the exact same way, smelling of burnt coffee, fresh floor wax, cheap perfume, and that sharp starch from freshly pressed uniforms. If you spend 18 years climbing the ranks in the United States military, your body recognizes that distinct environment before your brain even registers the noise. That morning, the room was packed to the brim with proud parents, wives adjusting dress collars, and little grandkids climbing onto folding chairs, while one older man in suspenders was already wiping away tears before things even kicked off. And there I was, 37 years old, with nearly 2 decades in uniform, about to pin on the rank of major after clawing my way up from an enlisted intelligence analyst to high-level Pentagon operations, standing completely by myself. Well, mostly alone, because my neighbor Hank had actually shown up. He was a 72-year-old retired Army Master Sergeant who walked with a heavy cane, constantly complaining about how his bad knees throbbed every single time it rained, which down in Maryland was basically every other day. He sat way in the back row, holding a hot Dunkin' coffee, and gave me a silent, respectful nod when I walked through the doors. Honestly, that small gesture almost broke my composure more than staring at those empty seats did, because at least someone in my life bothered to show up for me. I still kept glancing toward the main entrance anyway, acting completely foolish, hoping deep down that my parents would walk in late, offering some apologetic wave from the back corridor. But they didn't show. Of course they didn't. Colonel Ruiz stood right beside me near the edge of the stage before the official announcement started, looking me over. "You good, Callahan?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice low beneath the crowd noise. "Absolutely, sir," I replied. That was always a standard military answer, because it didn't matter if your personal life was completely on fire. You learned early on how to look your superior officer in the eye and say, "Absolutely." He studied my face for a second longer than I felt comfortable with, then said softly, "Son, you earned this rank." It was a simple sentence, but it almost made me lose my grip right then and there, because nobody in the house I grew up in ever spoke to me that way. In my parent home, any achievement I managed to pull off always came with some heavy condition or slight attached to it. When my younger brother Danny bought a sketchy, beat-up used boat, Dad called him a genius businessman with endless potential. When I spent 12 brutal months deployed in Afghanistan, they shrugged and said, "Well, at least you weren't in the actual infantry." When Danny opened a detailing company that collapsed into bankruptcy within months, Mom praised him for being incredibly entrepreneurial. Meanwhile, I finished officer candidate school while working grueling night shifts and recovering from a severe deployment injury, and all my mother said was, "You always were way too stubborn for your own good." Nothing I did ever fully counted in their eyes. The promotion ceremony started at 10 sharp with the national anthem, followed by opening remarks and promotions going down one by one. I stood in formation, listening to families cheer wildly for their sons and daughters who had flown in from places like Texas, Arizona, and Florida, while one grandmother brought a bouquet of flowers bigger than the young lieutenant receiving them. Then, my name finally echoed through the loudspeakers. Captain Aaron Callahan, soon to be Major. I marched forward automatically, letting pure muscle memory carry me up the steps toward the podium, and that is precisely when my eyes locked onto those 2 empty chairs in the middle row again. They had a perfect, unobstructed view of the stage, completely vacant. Suddenly, a bitter memory flashed through my mind from the very last school event my parents ever attended for me, which was my high school graduation back in Akron, Ohio, during the humid summer of 2004. Dad spent the entire time complaining that the metal folding chairs hurt his lower back, while Mom spent the ceremony talking about Danny's youth baseball tournament schedule for following weekend. That was over 20 years ago, and absolutely nothing had changed. Colonel Ruiz pinned the gold oak leaves onto my uniform with precise care, looking at me squarely. "You make this country and this uniform proud, son," he said firmly. The crowd clapped, and Hank let out a loud whistle from the back row. I forced a smile because that is exactly what you're trained to do when people are watching you, but inside, I just felt incredibly drained. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was way past angry. You ever get hurt so many times by the exact same people that eventually the sharp injury turns into a dull, permanent ache? That is precisely what it felt like sitting inside my chest. Emotional arthritis. After the applause died down, families crowded together outside near the flags to snap pictures, laugh with their arms slung over each other's shoulders, while someone even popped champagne from a cooler out in the parking lot, even though I was pretty sure that violated about 6 different military regulations. I stood on the asphalt awkwardly, holding a small cardboard box containing my old captain insignia, feeling like a total outsider. Hank shuffled over beside me, leaning heavily on his cane, and asked carefully, "Your folks really didn't make the drive down?" I just shook my head, staring at the ground. "To hell with them, then," he muttered under his breath, handing me a crumpled McDonald's napkin from his pocket, because apparently I had started tearing up without even realizing it. That actually made me chuckle a bit. "Sorry about that, Hank," I mumbled, wiping my face. "Don't you dare apologize for having normal human emotions, kid," he grumbled back in his gruff voice. That was a very classic Hank answer. A young lieutenant walked past us with his wife, carrying a little daughter who seriously saluted me with sticky fingers covered in chocolate cupcake frosting. I saluted the little girl back with a smile, then walked over to my Honda Pilot, climbed into the driver's seat, and just sat there in the dark parking garage for almost 40 minutes straight without even turning the engine on. My knees were throbbing intensely, a permanent reminder of Afghanistan, airborne school, and years of hauling heavy gear around like I was completely indestructible. I loosened my stiff dress collar and stared down at the shiny new gold oak leaf resting in the palm of my hand. Major Aaron Callahan. The 19-year-old version of me would have literally wept from pure happiness hearing that title, because back then, I enlisted in the Army primarily because I desperately needed to escape Akron before the city suffocated me completely. I could still vividly recall the recruiter's office near the old Chapel Hill Mall, with its buzzing fluorescent lights and crooked military posters taped to the faded walls. The sergeant had asked me why I wanted to join the service, and I almost told him the absolute truth, because nobody in my own house looks at me like I actually matter. Instead, I just lied and told him I needed a real challenge. Sitting in that quiet garage, I reached for my phone and opened my mother's contact info, my thumb hovering over the screen for a long time as my hand began to shake slightly. It wasn't a dramatic tremble, just enough to deeply annoy me. Right then, a harsh realization hit me. I was wasting my life waiting for validation from people who had already decided exactly who I was decades ago. To them, I was never going to be the successful son or the important member of the family. I was just a difficult boy who ran off to join the military instead of settling down nearby to make life convenient for everyone else. With a steady hand, I hit delete, watching her number vanish from my screen. In that quiet, humming garage, I whispered something I realized I needed to hear. I guess this one was just for me. But 6 weeks later, a single photograph changed everything, pulling my toxic family right back into my world with a vengeance. 6 weeks after that lonely morning at Fort Meade, a high-resolution photograph from a secure Pentagon cybersecurity briefing was published on the front page of the Washington Post. I wasn't even supposed to be the central focus of the shot. A senior defense official was standing directly at the wooden podium, addressing a room of reporters about critical infrastructure cyber threats, while I was captured off the far side of the frame in my operational uniform, meticulously reviewing classified documents. 2 heavily armed military security personnel stood guard right behind me, looking incredibly intense. It was just one standard press photograph, but back home in Akron, Ohio, it might as well have been a picture of me landing a spacecraft on the moon. Suddenly, old church friends from the parish started blowing up my parents' landline, and neighbors who hadn't acknowledged my existence in 15 years were suddenly bragging about how well they knew me. People who completely ignored my entire military career were now enthusiastically sharing the newspaper article all over social media. Then, almost 2 weeks after the picture went viral, my phone started buzzing late on a rainy Tuesday night. The screen displayed an unknown Ohio area code, but I answered it anyway, leaning against my kitchen counter. My mother's voice flooded to the speaker, sounding as sweet and warm as honey. Honey, why on earth didn't you tell us you were doing work this incredibly important? I should have pressed the red end call button the absolute second I heard her voice, and that is the honest truth. It wasn't because I hated her, because hate is simple, clean, and easy to process. What I felt deep down was a million times messier than that. It sounds completely ridiculous, but even at 37 years old, a wounded part of my soul still desperately wanted my mother to sound genuinely proud of me without there being some hidden agenda or angle attached to her words. Instead, she immediately kept going. The ladies at St. Bernadette's Church simply will not stop talking about that magnificent newspaper photo, Aaron. There was laid out bare, not a single inquiry about how I was holding up, no congratulations on the major promotion, and definitely no apology for skipping my ceremony. She skipped right past the actual human being and went straight to the audience reaction. I sighed, staring out my apartment window toward the wet Alexandria streets below, watching the rain streak across the glass pane, while a person walked their golden retriever through the dark drizzle, holding a plastic grocery bag over their head to stay dry. Mom, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice flat. It was just a standard apartment press briefing, nothing more. She let out a soft, dismissive laugh. Well, it certainly didn't look like just a briefing, sweetheart. Your father has been carrying that clipping around, showing absolutely everyone at the hardware store. That sentence almost made me choke on my own breath. My father, the exact same man who had casually dismissed my life's work as a pathetic waste of time, was now parading my picture around Akron like I was some legendary hometown hero. I tightly closed my eyes, feeling a headache coming on. "Are you still there, Aaron?" she asked when the silence dragged on too long. "Yeah, Mom, I'm here." Her tone suddenly shifted, taking on that fake, overly casual rhythm I knew far too well from childhood. "Listen, your father and I would really love for you to come back home to Ohio for a few days very soon. Dad truly misses you." No, he absolutely did not, but I stood there in my socks and let her keep talking anyway. She rattled on about various old neighbors, distant cousins, and how Danny's young kids kept asking about their famous Uncle Aaron from the newspaper. Every single sentence she uttered completely circled back to how thoroughly impressed other people were with my position, never once touching on how proud they were of me as an individual. There is a massive, painful difference between those two things, and I think anyone who has crossed 30 understands that distinction perfectly. By the time we finally hung up the phone, my stomach was in actual knots. I poured myself a mug of stale coffee from the morning pot and stood by my desk, staring at the digital copy of the Pentagon photo pulled up on my laptop screen. Objectively, it really wasn't anything spectacular. It was just me doing my daily job in uniform, surrounded by standard security and official paperwork. But back in Akron, perception was absolutely everything, especially in those old-school Catholic neighborhoods where everyone quietly and constantly measured the precise successes and failures of everybody else's family. They kept score on who got a messy divorce, who was drinking a bit too much, who lost their shirts in a bad business deal, and whose kids move away to the coast, never bothering to look back. Suddenly, because of a random newspaper clipping, I had become socially useful to my parents, and that realization sat incredibly heavy inside my chest. A few days later, Danny texted me for the very first time in almost 8 months. "Hey bro, so proud of you. Need to ask a massive favor when you get into town." I stared at the bright text message long enough on my phone screen to go dark. Then another text popped up immediately. "Nothing major, just need some expert business advice." I actually laughed out loud in my empty apartment, a bitter sound. Danny never made contact unless he was sinking and needed a lifeline. Growing up, my brother possessed an unbelievable, almost magical ability to constantly fail upward while avoiding blame. When he crashed 3 separate cars before turning 20, Dad blamed the local police department for targeting him. When his expensive business ventures collapsed, it was always the fault of the bad economy. When his second marriage fell apart, he swore up and down that she was just completely unstable. Meanwhile, if I brought home a B+ on a report card, Instead of a perfect A, my mother acted as though I had personally spit on the U.S. Constitution. I set the device face down on the table, trying desperately to ignore the crawling, sickening feeling growing inside my gut. But 2 days later, the situation got worse, infinitely worse. I was walking out a highly secure intelligence briefing room deep inside the Pentagon when my official government phone began to buzz aggressively against my hip. The screen displayed an unknown internal department extension. I stepped away from the main hallway and answered Major Callahan. A cold, professional voice replied on the other end. "Sir, this is Special Counsel Warren from Pentagon Legal Affairs. Do you have a moment to speak privately?" That single opening sentence is enough to completely ruin any officer's entire year. I ducked into an empty, dimly lit side corridor. "Yes, sir, go ahead." There was a long, agonizing pause on the line before the counsel spoke again, his words completely freezing the blood in my veins. "Major, your name and official military title have just surfaced during an active federal procurement fraud investigation involving Callahan Marine Supply and Logistics out of Ohio." My back hit the concrete wall hard, right against a framed portrait of an old Air Force bomber. "Danny." Of course it was Danny. My grip tightened on the phone. "What exactly is the nature of this investigation, sir?" The attorney continued in a flat, monotone voice that sounded completely mechanical. "We are looking into fraudulent representation connected to high-level defense subcontracting. Your brother has reportedly referenced your specific Pentagon position and clearance in multiple official recommendation letters to secure government contracts." I closed my eyes, feeling dizzy. "Sir, I never wrote a single letter for my brother's company." The counsel cleared his throat. "We are fully aware of that now, Major." The word "now" hung in the air like a heavy anvil. He emailed several attached documents while we were speaking, and I opened them with visibly shaking hands. There was staring back at me on the screen my own forged signature, my exact military rank, my official department title, and a glowing recommendation for his company to receive preferred government vendor consideration. It looked incredibly authentic, enough to absolutely terrify me. "Sir," I whispered into the receiver, "I had absolutely zero involvement in this fraud." "We understand your position, Major," the attorney replied. "However, until this federal investigation officially concludes, you need to completely avoid any direct communication regarding these specific contracts, and you cannot discuss this with anyone outside of legal counsel." The narrow hallway suddenly felt entirely suffocating, and I reached up to loosen my tie. What happens if the federal investigators think I was in on this? Another long pause followed. "Then you could completely lose your security clearance pending a full review." I swallowed hard, my throat completely dry. "And my military pension?" The counsel sighed softly. "We aren't quite there yet, Major." Wonderful. When the call finally ended, I just stood in that deserted hallway, staring down at my own forged signature for what felt like an eternity. 18 years of my life, brutal deployments, missed holidays, torn knee cartilage, a broken marriage, and countless sleepless nights. Everything I had painstakingly built from nothing suddenly felt incredibly fragile, all because my brother wanted to play big-time businessman using my name, and my parents were setting the stage to make me fix it. That evening, I drove straight over Colonel Ruiz's brick house in Arlington, Virginia, an old neighborhood packed with retired military officers and spotlessly organized garages. His wife kindly handed me a mug of black coffee, while the colonel listened in absolute silence at the wooden kitchen table, his face unreadable as I laid out every single detail of the federal investigation. When I finally finished explaining the forgery, I leaned back, feeling completely hollow inside. "You know what the absolute worst part of this entire nightmare is, sir?" I asked, looking up at him. I'm not even truly surprised that he did it. Ruiz set his own cup down firmly. "No, Aaron," he said calmly, his sharp eyes locking onto mine. "You're profoundly disappointed, which is a much heavier burden to carry." I just stared at him as he pointed toward the folded newspaper clipping resting on the counter. In our line of intelligence work, the most dangerous enemy is never the one who hated you from the very beginning. It's the one who suddenly starts smiling at you after discovering exactly how valuable you can be to their survival. That sentence landed like a physical blow because it was completely true, not just about military operations, but about my own blood relatives. A week later, my mother called yet again, demanding to know exactly what time my flight would land in Ohio for the weekend. This time, however, the superficial sweetness in her voice was entirely gone, replaced by an incredibly tense, fragile tone that made it obvious she was reading from a carefully prepared script. I finally agreed to board the plane, primarily because I desperately needed to confront Danny face-to-face before the federal investigators showed up at his front door with handcuffs. The flight from Reagan National to Cleveland was delayed for nearly 2 hours due to massive thunderstorms rolling across Pennsylvania, forcing me to sit near Gate 34 eating terrible airport food, while obsessively reviewing the digital legal documents on my tablet screen. Every single page made the situation look infinitely worse for my career. There were fake procurement templates, forged DoD letterheads, and explicit claims that Major Aaron Callahan personally guaranteed the reliability of Callahan Marine Supply. Danny wasn't just exaggerating a family connection anymore to impress his local buddies. He was actively impersonating federal military authority to steal government funds, and somehow his delusional mind thought this was a simple mistake he could easily talk his way out of. While the gate agent finally announced boarding, another urgent email notification popped up from Pentagon Legal Affairs with an additional file attachment. I opened the document as soon as the airplane reached cruising altitude, and halfway through the flight, my stomach completely dropped into a bottomless pit of pure dread. Danny hadn't just forged my name on recommendation letters to get a foot in the door. He had explicitly told federal contractors that I was actively pulling strings for him from deep inside the Department of Defense, using my high-level security clearance to bypass standard background checks. I stared out the small oval window into the pitch-black storm clouds hovering somewhere high over Ohio, and the terrifying truth finally hit me like a lightning bolt. This upcoming dinner wasn't a family reunion meant to heal old childhood wounds or celebrate my hard-earned military promotion. It was a carefully coordinated trap designed to force me into taking the fall for Danny's massive financial crimes. They were fully prepared to completely destroy my career, strip my rank, and take my freedom, perfectly willing to throw me to the wolves if it meant saving their favorite golden boy from a federal penitentiary. As the plane began its bumpy descent into the dark Ohio night, a chilling question echoed through my mind. If my own parents forced me to choose between my brother's freedom and my own life, how far would they go to destroy me when I finally said no? Akron looked noticeably smaller every single time I came back to visit, worn down around the edges in a grim way that really sneaks up on you after spending decades away from home. The old Goodyear manufacturing plant area appeared significantly grayer than my memory held, while empty storefronts lined Market Street like hollow shells. Drizzle smeared across the rental car windshield as I drove through the West Side neighborhood, passing small brick houses with faded flags and plastic statues sitting in the damp front yards. Nothing ever truly changed here, and that was precisely the core problem. My parents still occupied the exact same split-level house where I grew up, featuring a cracked concrete driveway and a crooked basketball hoop. Danny had nearly broken his neck on back in the 8th grade. I parked by the curb, letting the engine idle while a familiar ache formed in my stomach. Before I could even grab my duffel bag from the passenger seat, the front door flew open. "Aaron!" my mother shouted, hurrying out into the damp air with a smile so wide it looked physically painful. She wrapped her arms around me tightly, but the embrace felt incredibly rigid, like an orchestrated performance had officially begun. "Oh my God, look at you," she gushed, stepping back to admire the dress blues hanging inside my garment bag. "You just look so incredibly important now." Now, it was an interesting choice of words, proving that my worth was entirely tied to my new rank. Inside, the hallway smelled like pot roast and lemon furniture polish, looking completely identical to how it did 15 years ago. The same wooden cross hung over the dining room entrance, and the same old family photos lined the staircase, except for one glaring addition. Right on the center of the living room coffee table sat the framed Washington Post clipping, prominently displayed. I just stared at it, feeling a chill run down my spine. My father walked out of the kitchen, holding an open beer. "There he is," he announced loudly, his voice booming across the room. "The big Pentagon celebrity. Then he planted a kiss on the top of my head like we had been incredibly close my entire life, an unnatural gesture that made me want to take a step backward. "Are you hungry?" Mom asked rapidly. "How was the flight? What is Washington actually like? Do you work directly with United States senators?" The questions kept coming like a rapid-fire interrogation, without a single apology or mention of the major promotion ceremony they had skipped. Danny showed up an hour later wearing a local sports hoodie, acting as if absolutely nothing was wrong in the world. That was always his primary gift. My brother could stand right inside a burning building and still behave like everyone else was completely overreacting to the thick black smoke. "There's my absolute favorite federal employee," he chuckled, pulling me into a tight hug. "You only have one sibling in the government, Dan," I muttered. He smelled faintly of expensive whiskey and cologne, clearly trying to mask the scent of nervous cigarette smoke. We gathered around the kitchen island while Mom served food that nobody actually touched, and Danny immediately began steering the conversation toward his logistics company, mentioning shipping delays and supplier contracts. Finally, he leaned in closer, dropping his voice. "So, just hypothetically speaking, Aaron, what happens if someone accidentally exaggerated a professional military connection on some official government paperwork?" I looked him dead in the eye, my expression completely flat. "Hypothetically, Dan?" "Oh, come on, Aaron. Don't be like that," he whined, sighing dramatically while rubbing his forehead. "I was just trying to keep my business alive during a tough year." "You forged official Pentagon documents, Danny," I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. "I simply borrowed some credibility," he countered. I actually let out a sharp laugh, not because it was funny, but because hearing a 42-year-old grown man describe federal fraud as a creative resume choice was completely insane. Dad jumped into the argument immediately, slamming his beer down. "Now hold on just a second, Aaron. Nobody is saying your brother is perfect here. Really, Dad? Because that would be a refreshing change of pace around here." My father's expression hardened instantly, the old, toxic family dynamic clicking right back into place like old muscle memory. Danny screws up, and I instantly become the bad guy for pointing it out. Mom quickly stepped between us before anyone could raise their voice further. "We are all just incredibly tired from traveling," she pleaded softly. "Let's please not do this tonight." That first evening dragged on for what felt like an eternity. At one point, 2 neighbors from down the street randomly stopped by the house after hearing I was back in town. Randomly, my ass. My father had clearly tipped them off. He practically puffed his chest out like a proud rooster while introducing me to them. "This is my son, Aaron. He works directly with the president over at the White House." I have never actually met the president, Dad. I corrected automatically. "Well, you know exactly what I mean, son," he chuckled, waving his hand dismissively. The neighbor then asked what specific branch of the service I was in, and before I could even open my mouth, Dad proudly declared, "He's basically CIA Army or something highly classified like that." I stared at him, feeling a sudden wave of deep exhaustion. "Military intelligence," I said quietly. "Right, government spy stuff." Dad laughed. 18 years in uniform. And my own father still had absolutely no clue what I actually did for a living, because he never cared enough to listen. That realization hit me significantly harder than I ever expected it to, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth as the night grew older. Later on, after everyone had finally gone to bed, I stood completely alone in the upstairs bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror under the harsh fluorescent bulb. The overhead light was far too bright, showing every line of exhaustion on my face. I looked incredibly worn down in the places where life had leaned on me too hard for too long. I turned on the sink faucet, letting the rushing water drown out the sound, as I finally started to break down, tears blurring my vision. My knees were throbbing intensely from the long flight, and I rubbed one absent-mindedly while my eyes drifted to an old framed photo sitting right beside the medicine cabinet. It was a picture of me and my ex-wife at a military banquet almost a decade ago. I was noticeably thinner then, and maybe a bit happier. She used to warn me that the United States Army would take my entire body, and my family would just fight over whatever scraps were left behind. Turns out, my family didn't even want the scraps. They just wanted a shield. I wiped my face quickly, laughing bitterly at the total absurdity of the situation. 37 years old, a decorated major in the U.S. military, crying silently in my childhood bathroom like a helpless teenager. The next morning, things got significantly worse. Mom spent breakfast gossiping about the parish, while Dad read the sports section like absolutely nothing else mattered in the world. Danny finally wandered downstairs around 10 o'clock, wearing sweatpants, looking exhausted. "Hey," he mumbled, gesturing toward the back door. "Can we go talk outside for a minute, Aaron?" We sat out on the concrete patio while a cold October wind rattled dead leaves across the lawn. For the very first time since I arrived in Ohio, my brother actually looked visibly terrified, his usual confident swagger completely gone. "I need your help, Aaron," he admitted, his voice shaking. "There it is. I thought, listen, Dan, Pentagon Legal has already contacted me directly." His face completely lost all color. "They actually called you?" "Yes, they did," I said, leaning forward. "I never meant for this thing to get so big," he stammered, staring out toward the wooden fence. "You forged federal documents. Danny, I was desperate, Aaron. You used my name and my clearance. Because people actually respect you." That sentence made me unexpectedly furious. Because nobody in this house had ever respected me until other people started doing it first. Danny leaned in, his eyes pleading. "If this deal collapses, I lose absolutely everything, Aaron. My kids could lose our house." There was the ultimate emotional hostage tactic, weaponizing his own children when guilt failed to work. I stood up quickly before I said something incredibly cruel, walking back inside the house. That afternoon, while carrying a basket of laundry past the basement stairs, I accidentally overheard my parents talking downstairs. My father's voice floated upward clearly. "Just tell him to sign whatever documents Danny needs to clear this up." Mom answered nervously. "What if he refuses to do it, George?" Dad let out a harsh snort. "What else does he have? He's divorced, has no kids, and has money just sitting in the bank doing absolutely nothing for this family." I froze on the steps, my heart stopping. Then he added the exact sentence that changed everything forever. "And if he won't help his own brother, we will make sure everyone at church knows he turned his back on his own blood." Something inside my soul went completely still after hearing that. It wasn't rage and it wasn't heartbreak. It was total, crystalline clarity. They were never asking me to save Danny. They were demanding that I sacrifice my entire life for him, just like I always had. That night, lie awake in my old twin bed, listening to the furnace kick on and off in the dark, I made my final decision. Before anyone else woke up the next morning, I sat in my rental car outside of Duncan near Interstate 77, watching the fog roll in as I dialed a secure number. Defense Criminal Investigative Service. A woman answered professionally. I took a slow, deep breath, staring at the highway entrance. "This is Major Aaron Callahan," I said firmly. "I am ready to cooperate fully with your investigation." Sunday dinner at Danny's house started at 4 in the afternoon and somehow already smelled like cheap beer by 3:30. That was pretty standard for my brother's lifestyle. His place sat on a cul-de-sac in one of those newer Akron subdivisions built during the housing boom before everything crashed, featuring vinyl siding, oversized pickup trucks, and plastic decorations still sitting on porches weeks after Halloween because nobody bothered taking them down. I parked half a block away, sitting in the rental vehicle for a minute to watch relatives drift through the front door carrying covered dishes and folding chairs. A family gathering is what my mother called it, but everybody knew what it really was: a performance. Danny wanted witnesses around him as human shields, thinking if enough relatives packed the room, nobody would ask hard questions about his finances. I checked my watch, which read 4:07 p.m., before stepping out into the biting cold wearing my full Army dress uniform. People react to military dress before you even speak. Some straighten up automatically, others get uncomfortable, and certain individuals suddenly see you as valuable. When I walked up the driveway carrying a manila folder under my arm, conversations actually slowed down near the garage. My cousin Linda blinked twice, looking stunned. "Jesus, Aaron," she said, "you look incredibly official." "Apparently, that's my entire personality now," I replied, causing a few people to laugh nervously as I pushed past them into the warmth of the house. Inside looked like every Midwest holiday gathering rolled into one. With a football game blaring on the TV, aluminum trays of baked ziti on folding tables, beer bottles lining the countertops, and someone arguing loudly about local politics in the kitchen. My mother rushed over immediately, kissing my cheek before whispering, "Please keep things entirely calm today, honey." It was an interesting choice of words, as if I were the dangerous element in the room. Dad stood near the brick fireplace, holding court with 3 older men from the parish. And the second he spotted my uniform, his face lit up. "There he is," he announced proudly. "My Pentagon boy." I almost flinched hearing that because it sounded so hollow. He wrapped a heavy arm around my shoulder, introducing me like a trophy. "This is Major Aaron Callahan, Cyber Operations," he declared. One of the older men nodded respectfully, thanking me for my service, which always struck me as ironic since strangers respected my uniform far more than my own flesh and blood ever had. Danny appeared next, grinning way too widely while sweating slightly beneath his collar. "There's my brother," he shouted, "probably the smartest guy in the entire Department of Defense." He kept talking rapidly before I could even reply, bragging to the neighbors about my high-level security clearance and classified projects. Underneath all the charm, he was absolutely terrified, which was exactly what he deserved to feel. Dinner dragged on for over an hour, while Danny casually dropped hints about future government contracts, trying to silently pressure me into playing along with his scheme. At one point, Mom leaned close, whispering that maybe Danny and I could figure things out privately after dessert. "You mean cover for his crimes privately?" I asked bluntly, causing her smile to vanish instantly. Across the table, Dad suddenly raised his bottle to give a speech about how blessed the family was, and that is precisely when something inside me broke loose. They didn't want the truth. They just wanted a restoration of comfort, and they expected me to destroy my career to maintain their illusion. I set my fork down carefully, stepping away from the table as the entire room went completely silent. Standing slowly at the head of that crowded dining table, 18 years of rigid military training took complete control of my posture and breathing. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the ambient noise of the television, "there's something regarding this family business that absolutely everyone in this room needs to hear immediately." Danny's face instantly tightened, his fork freezing halfway to his mouth as a heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the relatives. 3 days ago, I continued, keeping my tone perfectly even and robotic. I initiated direct contact with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service to hand over evidence regarding widespread procurement fraud connected to Callahan Logistics. You could literally hear a pin drop on the carpet. Danny let out a high-pitched, incredibly nervous laugh, looking around the room for support. "Okay, let's hold on a second. Aaron is just joking," he stammered, his hands visibly trembling. In response, I opened a manila folder, sliding several printed documents across the polished wood table for everyone to see. There they lay. The forged recommendation letters, my falsified signature, and the fraudulent Pentagon letterheads he had used to steal government contracts. My mother's face instantly drained of all color, turning a ghostly white, while Dad stared at the papers as if they were written in an ancient, unrecognizable language. Danny finally snapped, slamming both palms on the table as he stood up so violently his chair flew backward against the drywall. "You went completely behind my back to the feds," he screamed, his eyes bulging with pure rage. "You forged federal military documents, Danny, and dragged my active security clearance into a criminal enterprise to cover your debts." I shot back, keeping my volume dangerously low, so they would focus entirely on his actions rather than my anger. "We are blood, Aaron. You are my brother," he yelled, weaponizing the word family like a shield. It was truly fascinating how corporate loyalty only mattered to them when someone was facing a prison sentence. Dad slammed his fist down, shaking the dinner plates. "Enough of this nonsense, Aaron." I turned toward him slowly, my eyes locking onto his. "No! Dad, you have had enough opportunities to fix this boy, but you chose to let him ruin my career instead." Mom began sobbing quietly into a napkin, real tears of shame finally spilling over, which almost shook my resolve. Almost. Suddenly, the loud, distinct chime of the front doorbell rang through the house, causing Danny to freeze in absolute terror. Nobody moved a single muscle. I looked directly at my brother, my expression completely cold. I asked them to meet me here tonight, Dan. My mother gasped in horror, burying her face in her hands, while my father stared at me as if I were a total stranger who had just ruined their lives. I walked calmly down the hallway, turning the brass lock to open the front door to the crisp night air, where two tall CIS investigators stood waiting alongside a federal IRS agent in a dark trench coat. There were no flashing police lights, no dramatic television rating jackets, and no shouting, just professional suits, briefcases, and a quiet, unstoppable arrival of absolute consequences for the golden boy. The lead investigator gave a polite nod, stepping past the threshold into the quiet hallway. "Major Callahan, thank you for facilitating this meeting tonight," he said, his voice echoing in the absolute silence of the house. Behind me, the entire family gathering sat completely paralyzed as the federal agents walked into the dining room to present Daniel Callahan with official arrest warrants. Danny looked utterly broken, his face slick with sweat as they calmly read him his rights, while the younger cousins peeked nervously from the corridor. My father suddenly exploded in a fit of desperate rage, glaring at me with pure hatred. "You have completely embarrassed his family name, Aaron," he shouted, his voice shaking the walls. I looked back at him, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "No, Dad," I replied softly, my tone carrying years of exhaustion rather than anger. "I just finally brought this house the one thing nobody here ever wanted to give me. The absolute truth." Nobody spoke another word after that as Danny was escorted out to an unmarked sedan, leaving my parents staring at the floor in total silence. I left Akron before sunrise the next morning, loading my duffel bag into the rental car without saying goodbye or leaving a note, watching the city fade in my rearview mirror as I hopped onto Interstate 77. 3 months later, Danny accepted a federal plea agreement, receiving a 3-year sentence in a medium-security penitentiary for his extensive procurement fraud, causing his company to completely collapse into bankruptcy. My father stopped volunteering at the parish out of pure shame, and Mom started sitting in the very back row at church to avoid the whispers of the neighborhood. I didn't celebrate any of it, because revenge doesn't actually feel sweet. It just feels incredibly heavy when it involves the people who raised you. By January, I moved my life into a peaceful, sunlit townhouse in Alexandria, Virginia, surrounded myself with quiet brick sidewalks and retired military veterans who actually understood the true meaning of honor. One rainy afternoon, as I carefully hung my dress uniform in the closet and placed a small plant by the window, I realized something beautiful. Everything in this new space belonged entirely to me, including my peace of mind. I didn't want to fight against my family. I simply possessed the ultimate strength to peacefully walk away from them forever. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey, and have a wonderful night.